Hello, I welcome you to a discussion on the topic Basic Understanding of Health and Religion. At the very outset, it is important to discuss briefly about the different sections that this module encompasses. Health and religion are the two of the most significant dimensions of our life. Studies have shown that these two aspects, namely religion and health, are connected to each other. Particularly speaking, religion has a major impact on the healthy lifestyle of an individual. Coming back to this module, I would now like to state the different segments into which it has been divided. To begin with, at first, we have a set of objectives on which the study is based. Second, I will be deliberating upon the different definitions of health, the dimensions of health as given by Peter Morrell, and the concept of whole person as propounded by Cockerham. So, the first two sections exclusively covered the aspect of health. From the third section onwards, the emphasis is given on religion. It includes the definition of religion, the substantive and functional definitions of religion, the perspectives on religion as given by Marx, Durkheim and Weber, and the important works on religion. Moving on, in the fourth section, the characteristics of religion have been listed. In the fifth section, the aspects of religion have been discussed. And in the sixth, religion has been looked at from such perspectives as anthropological, psychological and sociological. Proceeding further, in the seventh section, a disclosure about the understanding of health from the divine perspective has been reviewed. In the eighth segment, the relation between these two aspects, namely health and religion, have been discussed, focusing first on different theorists' viewpoints on this topic, second on the sociology of religion and epidemiology, and third on public health and religion. Suffice it to say, the entire module is rounded up with a conclusion. Thus, this is an outline of the entire module under discussion. In this lecture, the definition of health will be discussed. Although there are a number of definitions, each of them emphasize on a specific aspect of health. Usually, health is referred to an efficiency of a living organism free from any kind of illnesses. Here, primarily, we are going to discuss the definition given by the World Health Organization and those by René Dubos and Thomas McKeown. The definition by World Health Organization in its broader sense determines the complete well-being of human beings with respect to the physical, mental and social state, and not merely to the absence of diseases. Following René Dubos's definition, health denotes a person's ability to function properly. And lastly, Thomas McKeown emphasized on the importance of well-being more than the absence of any diseases or disabilities. He also talked of the role played by medicine in the promotion of health. The different definitions of health can thus be understood. On the concept of health, Peter Morrell has talked of three facets. These are the objective facet, the subjective facet and the social facet of health. Medical sciences have always explained health from a biological or physiological perspective. It is Morrell who talks about the actual occurrence of the disease at the objective level, that is, the presence of the pathogenic factor. The idea of illness is not necessarily the way a doctor explains or diagnoses a disease. Moral states that illness is what the individual senses is wrong with him, which in turn may lead to making an appointment with the doctor. Therefore, on the subjective basis, disease is what the individual senses is wrong with him on return from the appointment. From the social dimension, moral focuses on the various social factors behind the occurrence of diseases in individuals. He has stressed on the point of how social conditions marked by financial affluence affects the kind of medical treatment one is entitled to receive. In this sense, the poor and those belonging to the lower classes may not ever receive the kind of medical services and attention from which the rich benefit. Although the case of any illness broadly narrows down to the presence of a disease, Cockerham has attributed some more causes behind it. According to him, causes of illness can be psychological and social too. An individual's mental concept can be such that he starts believing he is sick and also exhibits symptoms of being so. This is the psychological dimension of Cockerham's explanation. The social causes can be cited when, for example, people living in unhealthy and unhygienic environments are more prone to contracting harmful diseases than those who reside in more desirable locations. In other words, it is the intensity and sometimes the duration of a disease that is indeed social rather than disease itself. Another point worthy of mention here is that Cockerham considers the human body to be analogous to the social system, where the organs are interdependent as well as are largely influenced by the outer environment. In defining religion, sociologists have made a distinction between the substantive definition of religion and the functional definition of religion. Both these perspectives are different from one another. The substantive definition deals with what religion is, and the functional definition is concerned with what religion does. To elaborate a little, it can be said that the substantive definition, which is also known as the essentialist definition, views religion as an enterprise, rather a speculative enterprise that tries to comprehend or make an understanding of ourselves or of our world. In no way does it deal with our social or psychological lives. Coming to the functional interpretation of religion, it must be noted that religion here gains importance in what it does for the people and how much impact it has on their social and psychological lives. In this way, these two definitions differ from each other, although both are valid for our understanding of religion, and neither can be considered to the superior of the other. Let us now discuss the classical perspectives on religion. We shall first begin with the ideas of Karl Marx in this regard. Karl Marx's idea on religion are best summarized in one of his renowned works, A Contribution to the Critique of Hegel's Philosophy of Right. Marx is of the opinion that religion does not make man, rather man makes religion. It is important to note that he does not view man as an abstract individual, but as a social being. It is the expression of this man's imperfect self-awareness that forms the premise of religion. Marx possessed a unique historical perspective on religion. He says that people seek refuge in religion from the sufferings inflicted on them by the society. This is particularly true in capitalist societies, where the proletariat experiences massive tyranny and ill treatment by the power holders. Religion acts as an opium to the exploited class and teaches them to accept the existing conditions with humility. It teaches submission to the existing socio-economic arrangements and to fate. It promises the poor and the oppressed salvation and illusory happiness after death only if they act meekly and passively in this life, rather than challenging the bourgeois. The next classical thinker we will discuss about is Emile Durkheim. Durkheim's work, The Elementary Forms of Religious Life, is one of the pioneers in the field of religion. According to Durkheim, all things can be divided into sacred and profane. He studied the Australian Aboriginals, Aruntas, and concluded that sacredness is based on collective representation. Sacred things, when taken together, maintain coordination and subordination with each other and form a system of the same kind. It is but a subjective reflection of the social categorical determinant. Religion, in turn, is experienced as the symbol of society. Among the Aruntas, he found plants, animals, and other totemic objects were worshipped. People worshipped them because a sacred quality was attributed to them. Although these were objects, they were symbols of reality unseen. Therefore, the idea of religion stems from the society itself, and God here is personified by such people. Third, according to Weber, religion and economy are interdependent, and each of them is influenced by a series of other conditions. Weber's concept of religion is more ethical rather than theological. Weber talks about the economic ethics of religion to find the influence of religion on economic life. By this, he means the totality of the practical forms of conduct which any particular religion demands of its members. Weber studied past and present civilizations and found that in India and China, industrialism could not develop because the dominant religion in these countries acted as a brake in capitalist development. But when he studied European nations, he found that the northern European countries, and particularly the Protestant ones, reached the highest level of capitalist and industrial development. Such countries were England, the Netherlands, and Germany. He later concluded that the ideas of Protestantism, particularly of the Puritanal sects of Calvinism, had the necessary spark for capitalism to emerge and develop. This is because Protestant ideas consisted in the dignity of honest labor, honest money making, etc. The people who adhered to such beliefs became the first entrepreneurs of capitalist enterprises. We now come to discuss some of the important works on religion. One of the best known works in the fields of both anthropology and sociology is the book by Sir James Frazer known as Golden Bough. What Frazer pointed is that All civilizations pass through three stages of development. The first stage is the stage where one believes in magic. The second stage is organized religion, which Fraser said is a civilized offspring of the first stage. And lastly, the third stage, stemming from the second, is one's faith in the powers of science. To put in short, primitive magician became the tribal priest or the medicine man. He acted as an intermediary between the two worlds, that is, the natural and the supernatural world. He could also cure illnesses using magical powers. In addition, he could also foretell future and control spiritual forces. Then, as civilizations developed, this role was acquired by the sacred king. So, the king became divine, and almost all of the myths of ancient civilizations were attributed to his rule. The book Totem and Taboo is another famous work on religion by the psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud. We all are aware of what a totem is. A totem may be a sacred animal elected by a particular tribe or clan. Members of this tribe are forbidden to kill or eat the totem except for certain ceremonial purposes. Also, members are forbidden to have sexual relations with one another. Freud says that it is this repression of sexual desires and drives that causes neurotic behavior among such people. Such neurotic behavior can be reduced with the help of taboos. Taboos, as we know, are those desires within individuals that must be restrained. People fear the harmful effects of any wrongdoing, and hence they develop a strong aversion to the desires that generate taboo. They then suffer from indecision, which in turn diminishes any chances of neurotic conflict. Thus, Freud says that taboo acts as a defensive mechanism to such problems as neurosis, which may arise from adherence to a strict totemic system. Yet another significant work on religion is that by Clifford James Geertz, a well-known American anthropologist. In his major work, The Interpretation of Cultures, Geertz has viewed religion as a system of symbols which acts to establish powerful, pervasive and long-lasting moods and motivations in men. It is important to note that Geertz is mostly remembered for his work in this area and its influence on symbolic anthropology. Symbols therefore form an integral part of his studies. Keeping this in mind, he regards religion as a symbol as well. Geertz asserts that religious symbols guide people in having an outlook of the world, thereby providing them with the message on how they should act in a given situation. These symbols or religion in general can never erase the pain and sorrows people are inflicted with, but it can certainly give them the strength to accept and encounter them. Citing the example of the Holy Cross, the religious symbol among the Christians, Geertz puts that members of this community considers the cross to be sacred since it provides them with the power, the motivation and the strength to confront the obstacles in life, if any. Thus, according to Geertz, in this way, religion casts a propitious influence on men. Religion has a number of important characteristics. Firstly, religion is a group phenomenon. Secondly, religion is a body of beliefs. Thirdly, religion involves a set of practices. Fourthly, religion involves moral prescriptions. And last but not the least, religion also involves the sacred and profane. These 5 points are actually the conceptualizations of Ronald Johnstone. Further elaboration of each of these characteristics are given in his work Religion in Society. There are 3 different perspectives to religion. They are the anthropological perspective, the psychological perspective, and the sociological perspective. The first, that is the anthropological perspective, holds that religion has gradually evolved out of a specific need of people. This need is the need to assign the causes for the occurrences of the natural phenomena as well as of other periodical happenings, rather experiences. Next comes the psychological viewpoint, which considers religion to be the response of people in crucial times. For example, in times where one faces some sort of danger or insecurity or any other dilemma to which he cannot accustom. In such times, religion helps in the maintenance of one's emotional stability. Lastly comes the sociological explanation. This perspective is majorly concerned with how religious institutions are related to the wider society, how the members of a society are connected to one another through religion, and how religion brings comfort or solace to its members, thereby binding them together. With this, an outline on the 3 perspectives of religion can thus be summed up. We shall now deliberate upon the various divine perspectives to health. The Jewish perspective is the one with which we commence this portion. The dietary laws of Judaism are important steps towards good health. Also known as the Kashrut laws, the dietary laws have divided food into 2 divisions, the treif or tone food, which are not to be consumed, and the kosher food, which are fit for consumption. One can name barley, wheat, poultry and meat obtained by the kosher way of slaughter as kosher food, but consuming amphibians, reptiles, meat obtained in a non-kosher way as treif food. Cheese is to be treated as a kosher food only if the rennet is obtained recombinantly or from the stomach of a kosher animal, following the laws of halakha or kashrut. Also, a Jew cannot cook milk and poultry together. In fact, utensils to cook these 2 items must be different at all times. Male circumcision in this religion is necessary as it is believed to prevent risks of genital cancer as well as other sexually transmitted diseases. Women during the menstrual period are kept separated due to ritual impurity, also known as nidha, so that it ensures abstinence from sexual intercourse and in turn ensures a proper sexual health. Christianity, having the largest number of adherents, places emphasis on the soul of an individual rather than the body. Nevertheless, it holds equal importance to preserve health and life as it is the most precious gift of God. A Christian can consume any kind of meat, but during the Lent, some of them may want to avoid spicy food or meat. The Roman Catholic monastics, who are known as Trappists and who follow the rule of Saint Benedict, for example, do not indulge in a diet consisting of meats. Surprisingly, Christians consider the alcohol as a gift from God, which can be enjoyed moderately, though drunkenness is treated as a stigma. One must follow a balanced and moderate diet to reach the highest possible form of good health. Islam is the second largest religion in the world, with its principles stemming from the teachings of Prophet Muhammad. Islamic faith places utmost importance on hygiene in the form of ghusl or ablution, a ritual that must be performed to ensure body cleanliness, as it believes that a clean body is more able to reach Allah, the Almighty. Speaking of the Islamic diet, there is a stark distinction between foods that can be consumed called halal and those that can't are known as haram. For example, meat obtained in a halal way is fit for consumption, whereas alcohol is categorized as haram. Islamic adherents are known to fast during Ramadan and other festivals. Fasting is known to have proven medical benefits like detoxifying the body and giving the digestive tract a chance to relax. Also, male circumcision in Islam ensures better hygiene in its adherents. Apart from these, Islam also promotes physical activities and a balanced diet and considers laziness and gluttony to be the root causes of all diseases. The ancient religion of the Hindu people, known as Hinduism, bears a pragmatic approach towards health. There is no rigid list of foods to be included in a Hindu's life, although beef is strictly forbidden. Pork meat too is not favored. A sattvic diet in Hinduism traditionally would be vegan, cooked with less spices and devoid of ingredients like onion, garlic, etc., which are known to be aphrodisiacs and foods that warm the body up. Ayurveda, a popular medicinal system in Hinduism that includes barks, leaves and flowers, have reportedly made the prevention of deadly diseases possible. Also, the freehand exercise system of yoga, which is a part of the ancient Hindu way of life, has proven health benefits like lowering blood pressure and ensuring a sound cardiovascular system. The origin of Jainism is indeed obscure, but it can be dated back to the 5th century BCE, when Mahavira and his teachings largely influenced a group of people. The Jain way of preserving health is complex. A true Jain must never kill any organism for food, follows a strict vegetarian diet, drinks only meticulously filtered water, and never consumes alcohol and other fermented food products. He is not even allowed to cook at night or to consume tubers. He doesn't consume milk, any dairy products or honey, as it is believed that these are the only source of nutrition to the concerned animal, and hence consuming them would be violence against them. Fasting during Jain festivals and the vow of Athai, which entails fasting for 8 continuous days, are observed among them. Buddhism is based on the teachings of a Hindu prince, Siddhartha Gautama, who was born in Lumbini, Nepal. Practice of Buddhism differs across time and space. Some of its adherents hold that any food obtained by killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying and partaking of intoxicants is not to be consumed. Killing a fellow creature and consuming its meat is a sin, and therefore a Mahayana Buddhist must follow a strictly vegetarian diet. The followers of the Theravada school, however, place no such restrictions on flesh eating. One must also avoid aphrodisiacs and intoxicants, and never indulge in sexual or social misconduct. Confucius was a philosopher who advanced the principles of hygiene and proper nutrition. Perished foods, unclean foods, non-distilled wines were all banned from the diet he prescribed. Gluttony was considered as the root cause for all ailments, and ginger, owing to such health benefits as reducing body heat and fever, was one of the main food items that is to be included in a Confucianist diet. Among the Confucianists, it is believed that turnip in winter and ginger in summer keeps the doctor away and ensures a healthy life. However, ginger must not be consumed at night, as that might have harmful effects on one's spleen. Talking of the relation between religion and health, let us first state that this particular field has interested many researchers in carrying out their explorations. Different theorists have put forward different views on this topic. To name a few of them, Kaplan, Benson, Adler, Koenig and Levin comes to mind instantly. Let us now consider these theorists individually to understand their views on this area. Kaplan opines that religion has a great influence on the socio-cultural life of people. He particularly spoke of the elderly and their association with religion and its institutions. Next, there is Benson, who notes the importance of praying as a form of religious belief. He says that when people are troubled with health disorders which make them lose their faith in the beauty of life, religion acts as a guiding light. Religion has the power to change the thinking process of an individual, and this is what the next theorist, Adler, believes. A person's views about a particular subject can radically differ when he views the same subject from a religious dimension. Talking of patience, let us next move on to Professor Koenig's views on health and religion. Koenig has stated that religion is important in the sense that it has tremendous healing power. Levin's views on the relation between religion and health is somewhat different. He says that the more emotionally distressed people become, the more they turn to religion and its powers, because religion acts as a support system and soothes people who are in need of an emotional backup. The discussion on the module of basic understanding of health and religion ends here. We will continue with further discussions in the next module. Thank you.